Well, good evening, and welcome to the December 13th, 2017 regular meeting of the St. Vrain Valley Schools Board of Education. If you would please join us in the saying the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. And with that, Barb, will you please call the roll? Here. Present.
Here. 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 Here.
Here. All right, thank you very much. And Barb, did we have any changes or additions to the agenda? No changes. And did anyone sign up from the audience to speak to a non-agenda item? All right, very good. And did we have any visitors? Oh, I know we have the Longmont report. Anything else? All right. With that, then we'll jump into it. Before I do that, let me, if I could, I don't think I've read the mission statement of this organization since probably our first meeting of the school year. And as hard as it is to believe, the school year is almost half over. It wouldn't be my intent to read this at every meeting, but different folks come to different meetings, and we just want to assure everyone that it is the district's mission statement that drives every decision that we make as a board. And I think that's part of what allows us to function so well, and indeed maybe the key variable that allows us to function. So that mission statement is to educate each student in a safe learning environment so that they may develop to their highest potential and become contributing citizens. And as we noted before, that includes each and every student without any exception whatsoever. So with that then, I'm going to move the board agenda just a little bit and ask that we go ahead and do the report from Longmont High School Student Advisory Council, the feeder report, before we do the board report. And then that way, if you guys don't want to stay, you don't have to. So Mark, if you would do the introductions.
That'd be great, Bob. Thanks so much. And just want to say a few things about the Longmont feeder principals got together last spring. And you know, Karen, you and I were talking about earlier about the strength of the system. And the system that we have in place that you all support is really, I think, what distinguishes us from other school districts our size, not only in the state, but the region and certainly the country. This is an example of how you use that system to be a very powerful instrument. They decided last spring they wanted their entire feeder system to work on the concept of growth mindset. And so they contracted with the speaker and actually contacted Dr. Haddad to open in August. And so we had over 300 teachers from the Longmont feeder system. And Don was great. He gave an inspiring speech about how to go from good to remarkable. And then what followed that up was kind of the how-to. And that's what I think you're going to see today is, so all the schools in the Longmont feeder system are working on this singular concept. It's a very powerful piece. So I'm going to turn it over to Rick Olson, and he'll do introductions.
Thank you, Mark. And Mr. Mills explained a lot about the feeder system's purpose or focus this year. President Smith and Board of Education, thanks for allowing Longmont High School feeder to be here tonight to present to you, and Dr. Haddad as well. Thank you for all your support. First, I want to introduce the Longmont High School feeder principals. If they'd stand, Mark Spencer from Westview, Ann Reed from Longs Peak, Lorinda Sampson from Northridge, Jim Hecox from Central Elementary, Jennifer Ryan from Mountain View, Renee Collier from Hygiene, and John Waller from Sanborn. I'll introduce introduce the student advisory, the students that are on the advisory committee after we show you a video. Each of the principals selected a student and a teacher to talk about the growth mindset and what they've been doing in their schools. And as Mr. Mills described, we got together at the beginning of the year, all the teachers and administrators and all the folks from the feeder system, and had this presentation. I'd also like to recognize Diane Lauer, because she was instrumental in finding the speaker, Kevin Bross, who came in and did the presentation on growth mindset, as well as her team from professional development, because after the presentation, we broke up into smaller groups depending on the content area that teachers taught, or the grade level, or their interest level, and they were able to deepen their understanding and talk further about the topic and take that with them to their individual building. So it was on our first day of PD that morning. So without further ado, I'll start the video.
Last spring, leaders in the Longmont High feeder system got together to discuss how to move from a very good feeder system to an exemplary feeder system. As we talked, we discovered that in all of our schools, teachers were talking about growth mindset, the idea that abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work. In August, every educator in our feeder system began the school year at Longmont High School with a growth mindset keynote speaker and breakout discussion sessions. We worked collaboratively to create initial plans for building this growth mindset for students, teachers, and parents in our Longmont High community. We believe that this work will be one more step in ensuring that every student graduates and finds success in their future.
In kindergarten, I use a growth mindset when I don't give up when making my letters. I use a growth mindset when I ask from how to work for my teacher. And I use a growth mindset when I feel like quitting, but I don't quit.
Critical to being an effective educator. I think the first thing we can do for our students is be really great models for them and be honest about the process, that it's not always the easiest thing. The thing that I do in my class that's been the easiest is to add the word yet. So anytime any kid in our class says, I can't, or even if I'm caught saying it, we always add yet, and it's always this group collaborative effort, and it creates this community approach to us learning and growing and just being honest with each other.
Growth mindset means that I can grow my brain like a muscle by doing challenging things. When I'm learning at school, my brain is connecting neurons and it gets bigger, stronger, and smarter. It's okay to make mistakes because I can learn from them and try new strategies.
In my classroom, I'm really excited because I've been really working hard on explicitly teaching to my kids growth mindset using Class Dojo. And it's so powerful and exciting to see my kids feel safe to take those risks, and they're not afraid to make mistakes. They get excited to make mistakes, and they get even more excited when they see me make mistakes. The most exciting thing for me as a teacher is to really see that the intrinsic motivation of my kids is going through the roof, and that's such a formidable challenge for all educators. More of my kids are begging me for more challenging tasks rather than settling for the easier ones, so that's super exciting as a teacher.
A growth mindset is when you don't give up. You keep on going until you reach the end. Even if something is really hard or challenging, I can say I won't give up. I can keep trying other strategies. Growth mindsets help me understand how my brain learns and works. I know I can do anything when I don't give up.
So when I think of growth mindset, I immediately think about the shifts in education recently with our standards have gotten more rigorous, and how Mountain View we're becoming a STEM school. And when you increase the rigor and you begin that design process, you get to a point where kids have to fail to keep growing. And so that can feel really vulnerable, and it can feel, it doesn't always feel good to fail, right? And so the kids need a safe place and need to learn to feel comfortable with that productive struggle. And so I think that the growth mindset really gives us an opportunity to have a shared language, a shared vocabulary across our school, and also skills that we can teach to the students to be able to work through that productive struggle and to feel okay with failing and to feel good about being vulnerable.
Growth mindsets help me open my mind to new things and ideas. They also help me become more appreciative of the learner profiles. The learner profiles that we use are principled, communicator, inquirer, risk-taker, knowledgeable, caring, thinker, open-minded, reflective, and balanced. Growth mindsets can help me open my mind and change my mindsets on things I don't think I can do. They make me more open-minded and willing to try new things I do, and that makes me a risk-taker.
At Central, we're an IB classroom, and we try to incorporate the growth mindset in everything we do. One of the things that we like to do is use the word yet. We use that quite often. And when we fail fast. And as a class, we use our minds grew. When a failure happens, our minds grew. And our minds don't grow without failure. And that's one of the major things that we use in 3rd grade right now. And as a learner, I say, I'm not a great 3rd grade teacher yet, and I'm gonna work on that.
What is growth mindset? Growth mindset is a mindset that believes intelligence could be improved. For example, if a certain student scores a B on a test, if that student has growth mindset, it thinks you can improve if you work hard and study. What would I say if I had growth mindset? Things I would say if I had a growth mindset would be the opposite of a fixed mindset. For example, if a student said, I got a great score on a test, I would say something like, nice job, I didn't get this question, maybe you can help me study on it?
The growth mindset is a shift in thinking that inspires lifelong learning. I feel very fortunate to be part of a district that strives for excellence, not only with our students, but also as educators. We were able to come together collectively at the start of the school year and learn more about what the growth set means as a teacher, and it felt very empowering to me as an educator to then carry that into my classroom. I think the consistent message of making our learners feel empowered and persevere when times are challenging is essential to academic success. So just remember the power of yet.
When I think of growth mindset, I think of persevering through something when it's hard, and when I use growth mindset is when something gets hard or when I want to quit, but I don't quit, and my teachers help me persevere through it and help encourage me to learn every single day.
So this year I've been using growth mindset as a facilitator of learning and also as a learner myself. And so with growth mindset in the classroom, I'm really working on trying to encourage and model mistakes for the students. One way I do that is with something called My Favorite No, where I have students solve a problem and I sort them into piles of yes, you've got it, and no, not yet, and we take a look at the one that has like the best mistake. And students are really starting to want to be the best mistake, which is awesome. And then we take a look and we see what do we really like about what the student did, and then how would you help them and how would you encourage them to fix it?
So one of the things that I would think of most when I come to growth mindset would probably be like sometimes in math, especially some of the topics we've had this year in algebra, like recursive rule and explicit rule, I would mess up one time and that's not such a big deal, but then it just keeps happening and I feel like giving up and I would get really upset. But then I would think of it's gonna be okay. I mean, everyone has to learn through this. I'm not the only one feeling this way, so that's what keeps me going along. And even if I get a bad test score or a bad score on an assignment, it'll be okay. I know I can push through it and learn from my mistakes.
Empowering kids is what this is all about. And we want them to have a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. In middle school, the middle school level, we also talk about grit.
And in order to have a growth mindset, you need to feel okay to fail. And you also need to be able to get back up on that horse. And if you have grit, you can get back in there and you can try again. You can look at how you failed. You can ask questions. You can talk to your peers. You can talk to someone who's an expert. And you can get back in there and try again. Grow that brain and become successful.
I think that we have to understand that each student has a different way of being engaged and being invested in their education and in the journey. And so I think it really helps to make sure that we're helping them experience flow, which is what I think growth mindset is about, is by creating this environment where they're getting enough challenges, but they also have the interest in creating that perfect spot where they're having the best experience that they can have.
Having a growth mindset is incredibly important during the transition to high school, because having this mindset that your brain capacity can always grow and you can absorb new information is key to taking advantage of all of the opportunities presented. This is especially true in high school, where there's an endless amount of clubs to join, sports to take part of, and classes to take, especially advanced placement courses, where this growth mindset will be key to success.
Very good.
Well, if you have any questions, obviously all the principals could answer any of the questions you have about what they're doing in their buildings or about growth mindset, or put them up.
All right, questions or comments from the board? Dick, did you want to say? So I've always got something to say.
Well, I have just a comment. That was an extraordinary presentation. I think the level of professionalism that you collectively exhibited through that presentation was just at the very highest level. So you not only talked about growth mindset, but you demonstrated that you are on that path through the presentation itself. So I would really like to just congratulate you and your whole team of educators, both for the focus and also for the presentation itself was worthy of the quality of the programs that you're developing. So I just am tremendously appreciative of your good work.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, that was well said. What I appreciate about the presentation is this: if as I've said before, the magic, the dynamic power that comes out of the school district takes place between the teacher and the student. And that's the nucleus. And that's what the presentation really emphasized, by going back and forth between the teachers and the students. It was really, really excellent. The growth mindset not only embodies the spirit of continuous quality improvement, which we've been, we're entirely supportive, but it nourishes lifelong learning, and probably and interrelated to that, the self-confidence and determination. That's the amazing. I don't think in our schools we've emphasized it in such a way. It's such a cultural change, and I'd reiterate to anyone, if you haven't been in our schools recently, you really don't know what's going on in our schools, and you shouldn't be judging them unless you see this kind of support for these children. It's really incredible.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I would agree, and one person I failed to thank or mention is Matt Wiggins, and Matt is the producer on this and did the filming, and as you know, our communications department is second to none, and he talk about calling somebody on a Sunday, and he just said, sure, I'll be there, and came out and helped us put it all together for us, so we thank him for that. So at this time, I want to introduce our students that from Longmont High School who are representatives on the Student Advisory Board, and I think they can talk about, they're all seniors that are here tonight, about their journey and what they're they've been able to accomplish and what they're involved in right now. As a matter of fact, they're in the midst of finals, so took them away from their studying tonight for that for a little bit. But Caitlin Bridge is our student body president, and you guys can come up as I call you. Eva DePonye. Sorry, Eva DePonye and Adam Pena, and they're all part of student council and leadership at the school as well as at the district level. So I was going to have them each introduce themselves and some highlights from what they've done in high school, but not only high school, the elementaries that they've attended through the St. Vrain Valley School District. So we'll start with Caitlin.
So I'm Caitlin Bridge. I went to Longmont Estates Elementary School, and then I went to Westview, and now I'm at Longmont, obviously, and I am involved in lots of extracurriculars. I do volleyball, I am in track, I am in student council, I'm the student body president, I'm also in yearbook as the photo editor, I'm involved in student leadership forum and student advisory council, NHS, and I work a part-time job on the side, so I have a lot going on. Once I graduate, I will have completed 9 AP classes.
Wow.
Including AP Calc, Physics 1, Physics 2, and Chemistry, so.
Wow. That is very impressive. I don't know what you do in your spare time, but yeah, I don't have much. And are your parents here? You have family here at all tonight?
No.
Okay. And your plans for college?
So I am going to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Daytona Beach, Florida for aerospace engineering.
Wow. All right, very good. Excellent. Thank you.
And I'm Eva DePonye. I'm also a senior at Longmont. I went through Central Elementary School and then Westview. I'm also involved in the student council yearbook. I'm currently playing basketball. And then I'm in the MBSA program, and that's probably been one of my favorite programs at Longmont High School because I've had the opportunity to go to cadaver labs, and we've done suture labs at the high school and just had so many opportunities to get involved within the medical field. In the future, I'm not sure exactly what college I'm going to go to yet, but I want to major in biology. And yeah, I'm just really excited for what's to come.
I'm Adam.
We know that.
Yeah.
We know who you are.
Yes.
All right.
I've been here a time or two. So for right now at Longmont, I'm a part of NHS, Student Advisory Committee, Student Leadership Forum, because I have a club, LHS United at Longmont, which is to promote social interaction between students with special needs and students without special needs, and I'm really happy about that. It's pretty fun. And it's going well. Actually, recently, Mr. Shell and I have been working on, it's mostly Mr. Shell, but we've been working on getting a club sponsored by Special Olympics, which I'm really excited about, so that's cool. Let's see, what else? It's been a while since I've played a sport, actually. I tried playing football for 3 years, that didn't work out. I got injured every year. Maybe it was my size, I don't know. And then I did track for 3 years, and I think I'm going to actually play ultimate frisbee in Boulder Valley, one of the schools there, probably Fairview or something. But maybe we should get an ultimate frisbee team here in the district. One of the schools should get that. But let's see. And right now I'm taking AP Calc and physics and research. I'm working on a research project in that class, which Dr. Martyr and Ms. Capuchin are helping me with, which I'm pretty grateful for. And I'm also doing AP, there's another one I can't remember. But and then I got a calc and physics test tomorrow, so right after we're done here, I'm gonna go home and study for that, because gotta finish strong. But yeah. And then next year I'm looking at going to one of 4 universities. I'm trying to go to either Tulane, Emory, Johns Hopkins, or Vanderbilt, and we'll see. Fingers crossed. And I want to study neuroscience there. And then after that, I'll go to med school, and the goal, the final goal is to become a neurosurgeon, but that's really hard to do. So it's going to take a lot of hard work and probably a lot of ego checks. So,
All right, thank you. Adam, are your parents here by chance?
they're not here.
No?
They're not here.
Even I didn't ask you.
They're not here either.
Okay, all right, very good. All right, and anything, what else, Rick? Anything else?
No, again, I'd just like to thank you. I think the successes of our students are a tribute to what the St. Vrain Valley School District provides in terms of opportunities, and these are definitely some showcases of success, working their way all the way through the St. Vrain Valley School District, and their post-secondary plans demonstrate that they have the skill set to take them to that level. So
Yeah, you bet. No, I do want to recognize the principals that are here this evening, because while I would stand by that idea that the teacher-student relationship is kind of where the magic happens, that doesn't happen outside the context of a well-run school. That's the absolute prerequisite for that, and the folks that are here tonight are just exemplary building leaders. So we really appreciate you guys. Thank you very, very much for being here tonight. Other comments, questions? All right. Listen, thanks very much. It was a great presentation. It was wonderful.
I'm going to hand these out. I'm supposed to hand these out to you guys before.
Okay, very good. And good luck to you all. I suspect it's not a matter of luck on your finals, but good luck nevertheless. Thank you.
There's only two left. Oh, just one is fine. We'll read together.
All right. With that, then, we will move on to board recognitions and superintendent update. Why don't we start, Don, with you, if that's all right?
All right. Well, we are finishing the first semester, so a lot of our high school students, as you know, are taking finals. And so stress levels are a little bit high, but talked to a number of them and they're doing well. So that's kind of exciting. It's amazing how fast the first semester has gone. I did have a chance today to spend about 4 or 5 hours at Sunset Middle School, just sitting in the counseling office and visiting with staff members one at a time and just kind of talking with them about their year and how things are going. So I ended up having about 38 meetings, which is pretty much most of their entire staff took the opportunity, and really complimentary about Don Macy and Sarah Olson and their community support and everything. And so that's always good to hear and see. And everybody from teachers to the custodial staff to the secretarial staff to the counselors, they all had an opportunity to come in, so that was great. I want to share with you a little bit from the American Heart Association. I think I sent this to you, but one of the things that was exciting is St. Vrain received the Workplace Health Index Award, and it was only given to 24 companies in Colorado and only 4 school districts, and it's for staff wellness, and we'll be going to a symposium that they have in February to kind of celebrate. But we now have 27, and we just added another 7 schools that are participating in the American Heart Association program around movement and health. And one of the things that they shared with me is that they're lowering the blood pressure numbers from 140 down to 130 so that they can be more proactive in terms of addressing issues. One thing that they shared that was interesting was that there's been a steady decline in the number of issues with heart disease and deaths, but this year, for whatever reason, they saw a spike. And so they're trying to figure out, what's going on with that. So, pretty interesting conversations. The other thing is, I apologize for being late tonight. I was at the Parents and Education meeting at Longs Peak. Actually, Ann Reed was there. So we had approximately 40 parents there tonight. We were able to have dinner with them and talk about some of the things that we're doing in our schools and our programs. We got some good feedback and met some new people, so that was fun. The new schools continue to go up. I think if you let a week go by and you go visit them, you'll see just a whole other building. It's pretty amazing how fast. Ryan, you guys moving at pretty much warp speed there. Yeah, no, that's exciting. It's exciting. I did share with you, we've had numerous achievements on the part of our students. I try to send those to you, but just for the audience's perspective, we did have 15 semifinalists so far for Betcher, and that's the most that we've ever had, 15 semifinalists. And there'll be 40 finalists named across the state. And every year we've been fortunate to have at least 1, 2, and sometimes 3 of the Betcher Scholarship winners, but maybe we'll have more this year given the number of semifinalists. We also have a larger number than before with our National Merit semifinalists. So we're seeing, when you hear students like the student you just heard, you can see why, And I think what's happening, is you see the system working its way up through preschool and kindergarten. It's about 10 years ago since we started a lot of these programs, and these kids are hitting high school now, and you're just seeing some really pretty incredible thing. Tori T just reported that we had another significant jump. I don't know if, Jackie, if you knew the exact numbers, but there was another significant jump. I don't see Tori, but in the number of kids taking the advanced placement tests and signing up for them. So,
I do have the numbers.
Yeah.
Just give me a second.
Because that number just continues, and I think that it's reflective of the fact that more kids are prepared to take.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, with the emphasis we put on years ago on early childhood and in the early years, I think now it's paying off. That's exactly right.
So the number of AP courses taken is 3,652, and that's a 975 course increase, or 27%.
Wow.
And in concurrent enrollment, we are up by 512 courses, which is a 53% increase in concurrent enrollment courses in 1 year.
So it's just, you can see that wheel starting to turn and kids coming in much more prepared for that kind of rigor, which is exciting. Also had a meeting the other day with Amy Baca, who's going to be the new president of the Colorado Education Association. We had an opportunity to get together with Steve Villarreal for lunch, and that was a really positive meeting. And we talked about some different ways that we can continue to partner with our teachers, not only in St. Vrain, but across the state, to continue promoting public education as a whole. So we're excited. And the last thing, I did go to Timberline the other night. They had a great P-TECH and STEM program, and that was fun. A lot of families there, and Carrie Borski and her team are doing really, really good work. And I think you're seeing, that's the other piece, and I won't belabor and go into all of it, but I've sent you, I only send you guys, 1 out of every 25 emails that I get highlighting a school like Altona that just participated in Cyber Patriots, or Westview that had the top 7 schools or kids in the vocabulary competition. So I try not to inundate you, but it's just really reflective, and you see that coming from all of the schools. Erie Middle School with the most number of all-state middle school choir students in the state. It's really exciting. It's just exciting to see all that. And we've been having massive turnouts at the open house meeting, and we just sent out another superintendent's update, so I hope that a lot of people will have a chance to read that, because there are a lot of the things highlighted there. So anyways, a lot of good stuff going on. So thanks to our teachers and our students and our parents.
All right, thank you, Don.
Sure.
All right, Dick, board reports. We didn't give you a chance to prepare, so.
Very short.
Oh,
I use the time.
Okay, very good. Yeah.
Is the stopwatch going?
No. Here I go.
Well, I will thank you, Bob. There are many wonderful things happening in the school district, throughout the school district, and I'll just hit the highlights. I realize we haven't mentioned for time the Northern Colorado Workers' Compensation pool that Joey and I serve on that board, and that is a gathering, a group of school districts that we pool our risk with, and it substantially is saving us a substantial amount of money in terms of premiums and experience, It's managed extraordinarily well by Beecher and Carlson, our consultant group. And I really wanted to say thank you to Heather Keith for her wonderful work as staffing that program and ensuring that the pool has the right information from our district, as well as her good work in making sure that that whole initiative is working well. I would say that the St. Vrain Valley School District probably is our work in the fact that we're part of that pool is really helping our neighboring districts at Estes Park and Weld County. And so it's good for us, but it's also very good for in terms of increasing the risk pool for our other neighboring school districts. I haven't had an opportunity to go to the Leadership St. Vrain meetings, and I wanted to give a shout out to really our staff. They've done a tremendous job describing for a large group of parents this year, 60 to 80 parents, community members come to these meetings, and we had a excellent opportunity at Skyline High School 2 months ago to actually right after our last meeting to hear from our legislators about initiatives underway and to share with them some of our priorities. And just earlier last week, we had an opportunity to meet at Iowa High School. Those meetings are, and there we heard the importance of assessments and the role they play in helping us, our students, prepare for success. And they are tremendously informative, and I think that it's a wonderful way to dig deep for our community members and learn what's happening in detail about why our programs exist and how they can connect with helping us take them to the next highest level. Our early childhood programs are proceeding. I want to give a shout out to them as well. I had an opportunity to visit Spark Preschool with Paige Gordon and spent a delightful afternoon in classrooms and at each level, and talked with her about the sort of results she's seen for her preschool population as they enter into our kindergarten and elementary schools. And that early childhood component is tremendously important in terms of closing the achievement gap among those that are so different socioeconomic populations throughout the district. I also serve on the LENA Advisory Council. We have a pilot project going on with the R Center, and we had a very productive meeting. We brought 4 cohorts of parents and families in the who have children in the 0 to 3 area, a tremendously critical time period for students, for children as they're developing language, acquiring a language, and their critical thinking skills during that time. And so I'm excited about those initiatives. We are making good progress, and I think that we are discovering a foundation upon which we can build a stronger early childhood programs as part of our systematic approach to increasing student achievement. I'm going to stop there. There's plenty more. As Don has said, there's I could go on, and I have at prior meetings, but that gives you the tip of the iceberg about what we're seeing throughout our district.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, it's just a super busy time of year. I'm sure everybody's experiencing that, but everything from all the plays that went on in the high schools, which were amazing, to I think the gala happened since we were here and gave our reports. I'll focus a little bit on the open houses that I attended in my feeder at both high schools and both middle schools, and every year they're just amazing, and I learn something every year.
In particular, at Meade Middle School this year was, for the most part, it was a 6th grade open house for the rising 6th graders, and they were focused in that wing. So I snuck over to talk to the 7th and 8th grade teachers, and it was just so great to be in their classrooms and learn about their integrated teaching with their English and history, and how they weave together a lot of the subject topics that they teach. So I just really enjoyed touching base with them. And then the Skyline Open House as well. How Heidi Ringer stands up there and goes through like the plethora of programs available at that high school to an auditorium full of hundreds of people. It's amazing. I mean, everything from P-Tech to everything they've done there, the STEM, the BPA, the AP Capstone programs, it's just, the programming is endless. And it shows in the student body, in the graduation rates, in the attendance rates, in so many measures of success at that school. But they were all really outstanding. And then also I did attend 2 counseling advisory meetings, and Karen was with me at the one at Niwot. I also went to one at Meade. And those 2 schools happened to reach out to me through their counseling departments, because they're working through an accreditation through the American Association of Counseling. And their work is really fascinating. I mean, they kind of work on setting their vision and their mission as counseling departments, and then setting goals around data. And so the data collection was really fascinating. Everything from where are their PSAT scores, where are their SAT scores, their attendance rates, the number of students getting Fs and failing classes, and how they do targeted interventions for that. Suicide prevention. I mean, it was a huge range of topics that they covered, and it really was eye-opening. We all know this, but it kind of put into metrics how much work they do, and how critically important they are in the success of the school and creating a positive student environment. So I really enjoyed those, and those are happening on a biannual basis. So if anybody has an opportunity to participate in those, I did it a little bit as a board member and a parent, but it was really interesting. And then I had some information about finance and audit, but I will probably wait till we get to the mill levies, and I'll hand it off to Amy. Thanks.
Okay.
All right. So I've had a very busy start to this school year, and but I've had some really unique opportunities to be in our community, and not just in the feeder system. We were just, through my church, we were just in Indian Peaks not too long ago doing breakfast for their staff, and that was really unique. And getting to be in that environment with both hats that I wear at the same time is really neat. To get to see the inside and how everything works for both. And I don't get to Indian Peaks, that's not my feeder that often. So it was pretty neat. Then I was able to go to, and what's really cool is I didn't know about this until recently, but having a daughter who is deaf, there is this really unique part of St. Vrain that is, they get together all of the kids that are deaf and hard of hearing in this school district and neighboring school districts that's open, and they'll get them all together and they take them on field trips. So it's really neat, because then, like my daughter who's in Coleridge, she doesn't know anyone who is deaf or hard of hearing or anyone like her, and so it's really neat for her to be around someone and peers who have some of the same struggles that she does. She doesn't feel like she's the only one, and it's really helped with her self-confidence, to know that there's other people out there that struggle just like her, so and she makes friends that way, and they're texting, and it's great relationships for her. And then also Apex, I don't get to attend much of Apex because in their classrooms, because they are in one of my employer's buildings. But I was able to talk with Kim Lancaster and attend their Apex holiday show. It was so stinking cute. And what they do with those kids is just amazing. I've loved all of the Christmas shows and concerts and plays and everything that's been going on. It's been fantastic. And then I also I just wanted to briefly touch on Elementary 27. I've heard wonderful things about how quickly it seems to be going out there, and it looks like it's just sailing right away. Every time I drive by, I think that wasn't there yesterday. So it's looking great, and the neighbors nearby they seem to be happy, and everybody is doing really well. So so I'm looking forward to it. Anyway, that's it.
Very good, thank you. Joey.
Thanks, Bob. Wanted to take a minute. I've had an opportunity to go out and visit several schools, so want to take just a second to thank all the principals for making time for me to make those visits. Always enjoyable. I know that all of us most enjoy our board time when we're in schools and we're seeing students and interacting with teachers and whatnot. So definitely time well spent. I also want to take a brief second, Dick, and thank you for serving now on the CASB board, representing a large district for the next 2 years. Thank you very much for taking that on, and congratulations. Yeah, that's wonderful to have that there. And then I know, Dawn, I was talking with you a couple weeks ago, and I just wanted to recognize the communications department. I think back to the first high school options publication that I think it was about 6 years ago, was the very first one. And it was pretty small by today's standards. But you can really see, really, it's sort of reflective of the evolution of the district, really, when you think about the programs that have been added, all the opportunities for students, and now they're showcased in this beautiful publication that families are able to use to help them make choices. The choices that best fit their students. It's also a fantastic marketing tool, in all honesty. It really gives you a snapshot a Snapchat. Clearly, I do Snapchat. A snapshot of the district and what's available here in St. Vrain. So I believe the communications department is coming to a study session or a board meeting at some point. So it would be great for us to be able to acknowledge them and all of their hard work also. So, all right, thanks, Bob. No Snapchatting during the meeting.
Thank you, sir. You know, I think I get around, and I mean that in the best sense in terms of visiting schools and seeing the activities that are going on, but I always learn so much every time I come to one of these board meetings and hear what is going on and see what the students are sharing with us. We had the Longmont come in today and talk about the mindset, and I think that's indicative of what's happening in the school district all around. And we see the students challenging themselves, the teachers offering opportunities to really excel, and the programs that are available now. We hear about the number of students that are getting into AP, and it really is a wealth of opportunities that these students can challenge themselves to achieve pathways that are critical and really personal to themselves. And I think that's a great way to be. I will share that I've been to, as I said, the open houses and the plays, and I'm amazed at those, but I'm going to talk about the mindset in terms of challenging yourself and achieving or not achieving, and those lessons that we learn along the way. Erie has had an incredible successful run as a football program, and they made it through several challenging games and very exciting games all the way to the AAA championships, which happened to be held at the Air Force Academy. And that was the first time I'd been there, and it was amazing to see. Beyond the pure competition and the ability for our students to compete at that level, much more important to me was their heads were in the game. They really never lost sight of the fact that they were a team, that they didn't give up, and they came back at halftime to really have the game within their sights. And they lost it on a couple of plays, but at the end, there was definitely sad faces, but there was really shoulders to be carried high, and I think that is lessons we all learn in life in terms of it's the achievements that we that sometimes our losses are our greatest opportunities to learn lessons, and they certainly did on that day. So I was very pleased with that. And then I'll move over to the VEX robotics programs that we have available at our schools now. We have, I think, over 300 teams that are competing in robotics around the district, and it's grown from a group 4 years ago of, I think, of 30 or 40 students to a program that now has to be housed in several different schools, and I happen to MC the one at Red Hawk, and there were I think there were supposed to be 40 teams, but I think 38 teams actually showed up for it, and started at 8 o'clock, and we were out of there at just before 4 o'clock. But the teams that went there, if you haven't been to a robotics competition, it's an amazing thing to see. Not only do these kids put in a lot of time and effort after school, but when they get to these programs, the way that VEX works is they compete as teams, and they compete with another team that they've never worked with before to accomplish a task. So they have to navigate that competitive edge along with a collaborative edge. And it's really impressive to see how these students handle those pressures as well. The last thing that I'll talk about is we've been very lucky in Erie to have a couple of astronauts come in, which is amazing. So I've met 2 astronauts in my life, and I think that was one of my dreams. Young man watching Neil Armstrong walk on the moon I always thought that would be a cool job to get up there and hit a golf ball or take a walk around a space station. There weren't space stations back then, but there are now. But I haven't been able to do that, but I've been able to talk with 2 astronauts. And Jack Fisher came in this last time. He grew up in Longmont, and he has a bunch of family members that now go to school in Erie. And he presented to the Erie High School and also the government class of the middle school. And the questions were very provocative, extremely well thought of, and in the end, some of them were asking the pathways to getting to be an astronaut, and his main message was to believe in yourself, to challenge yourself, and find out what really motivates you. And I think that's a great message for our students to have, is to really kind of reach for what gets them in the game. And that's something that we are offering with so many different extracurricular activities. We're offering it with our standardized classes. We're offering it with our AP classes. And just to hear about all the opportunities that our board members are going to and our students come up here and present to, I get around, but I haven't gotten around enough. I'm looking forward to learning much more about what's happening in the school district, and I'm always amazed at the work that our students and our teachers do. So that's the end of my report.
Thanks, Bob. So over the last month, I have had the pleasure of visiting kids, meeting staff, touring the 7 schools in our feeder system of Niwot High, with their principals, Karen McClure at Burlington, Eric Rushhub at Niwot High, Kathy Jo Walder at Indian Peaks, Nancy Pitts at Niwot L, Dawn Macy at Sunset, Denise Cook at CDC in the Old Columbine High School. Just a great experience. A shout out to and congratulations to Andrea Smith at Colorado, Assistant Principal of the Year. She's here tonight. Thanks for being here. I also want to thank the Assistant Superintendents, Mark Mills, Diane Lauer, Tori Teague, Ella Padilla, Rob Barry, Patty Canonis, and our CFO, Greg Fife, for taking time out of their days to meet with me and show me the ropes, tell me about their roles, and explain to me the most important things that they think a new board member should know. So thanks for that time. It was very valuable to me. Also, special thanks to Brian Lammers for the tour of our 2 new schools and the Innovation Center site. That's just going up in record time. It's amazing to see those bond dollars at work so fast. So thank you. And each of these leaders I've mentioned in different ways demonstrate 100% dedication to our students through efficiency, teamwork, leadership, and they contribute tremendously to the supportive systems we have in place throughout the whole district. And as the new member of the board here, I realize I have so much to learn. But I want to tell also the entire board how much I appreciate their support, reassurance, great advice, sense of humors. I'm so humbled to be here and just honored with this opportunity and so excited. So thank you.
Thank you, Karen. All right, well, you had mentioned a number of things. I won't repeat them. Actually, I tried to put together a list of some of the accomplishments that Don has sent to us, and we'd be here another hour if I enumerated all of them. It took up about a page. But Don, I wanted to recognize the students that attended CASB with us, the excellent way in which they represented this school district. I did give them a homework assignment, and I asked them to come back to a board meeting in January and tell us the one or two things that they learned, at CASB. So if you wouldn't mind arranging that, it's whenever it works out. It wouldn't have to be January, but it'd be great to hear from them what their takeaways from CASB were. I do want to thank Dick for running for the CASB board. Being on the CASB board is an additional commitment of time. I think we've discussed the possibility of having a study session and maybe how we could influence the direction of CASB in the future. One of the ways I think would be this excellent and proactive initiative that you've put in place with regard to telling the very positive story about public education in Colorado, because it's a great story we need to tell it. And I did want to recognize that we're one of the 11 top digital school districts, not simply because we won that, we're given that recognition, but it goes back to the theme, Don, that you mentioned a few minutes ago. I think that when these first and second graders are learning coding at a very basic level, they're learning the organizational skills, the logical, the logic that they need, the critical thinking skills that they'll take to every other subject that they study. So it's not just about the technology, and it's not just about programming. It's about being good critical thinkers and being confident in that ability. I did want to recognize Andrea, even though you were already recognized. Congratulations, well done, Brian, great job. One last thing I'll mention that I think is so neat. We've seen and heard how our older students mentor our younger students, but you mentioned on the Skyline High School students are partnering with Alpine Elementary for a week of learning in the computer science education. And I think that kind of role modeling is just a really, really critical piece of the education. You don't see it listed on the curriculum or anything, but I think it's remarkable. It's just great stuff. So, all right. And I would welcome Josh Atherton as our new Education Foundation Executive Director. Would love to get him here at some future meeting and have him introduce himself. So it'd be great. All right. Well, that's it. And we've done the Longmont High School Advisory Council. So we'll move on to consent items. We have a few. Consent item 7.1, staff termination of leaves. 7.2, staff appointments. 7.3, approval of minutes for November 8th regular meeting, November 15th study session. 7.4, approval to extend the contract for the MyOn Reader program. 7.5, first reading adoption. Board Exhibit JFABBE, admission of non-immigrant foreign exchange students. 7.6, approval to purchase supplies using the Colorado Health Foundation Physical Activity Grant. 7.7, approval of contract to increase the architect agreement for Silver Creek addition and renovation. 7.8, approval of the amendment to the construction manager general contractor contract for the Main Street School renovation project. 7.9, approval of the contract for the architect for the Lyons Elementary addition and renovation. 7.10, approval to purchase Apple Technology products in professional development. 7.11, approval of contract for mobile device and computer management solution. And 7.12, is the approval of the vendor providing purchased services over $100,000. Did any board members wish to pull any of those items for discussion? Not hearing any requests, I'd ask for a motion to approve.
So moved.
By John, seconded by
Second.
Dick. And Barb, would you please call for the vote?
Mr. Ahrens? Dr. Martyr?
Yes.
Ms. Pierce?
Aye.
Mrs. Ragland? Ms. Segrist?
Aye.
Mrs. Cisco?
Aye.
And Mr. Smith?
Yes. All right, thank you very much. Action item 8.1, recommendation to approve the contract increase to the architect agreement for the Innovation Center project. Brian?
Yeah, Bob, 8.1 is a request to increase the contract amount for the architects for the Innovation Center. This is mainly driven from the annexation process, and the majority of this work was designing the roads around that, which was really driven by the annexation process.
Any questions? No, seems pretty straightforward.
Very straightforward.
All right, very good. Take a motion to approve.
So
By Paula.
Second.
By Dick. By Joey. Hard.
We sound the same.
Yeah. So, Barb, take your pick. Help me out.
Mr. Ahrens.
So if you would call for the roll.
Mr. Ahrens? Dr. Martyr?
Yes.
Ms. Pierce?
Aye.
Mrs. Ragland?
Yes.
Ms. Segrist?
Yes.
Mrs. Cisco?
Yes.
And Mr. Smith?
Yes. All right. 8.2, recommendation of approval for the amendment to the construction manager general contractor contract to Aspen Ridge Preparatory School addition and renovation project.
Right. And so 8.2 is, well, we've been working with Aspen Ridge to develop their construction project there. It's part of the bond project, and we planned that all along. So this is a request to move forward on that project. The total contract amount is $4,098,637. What it'll do is build a multi-purpose room, a new gym, and cafeteria area. Now, in regards to a charter school, there's some agreements that were struck. Those were done back in July, and I could swing at them, but truthfully, Greg was in the heart of it all, so maybe I can ask Greg to kind of chime in.
Sure. So if you remember going back, this was the only charter school that we actually did a building construction project with. The other ones were security systems or something, which is, you know, if a charter school were to cease operations, we could pull that system back out. We could do those kinds of things. So Aspen Ridge was the only one. And there's state statute related to how all of that can happen, and our attorneys worked with Aspen Ridge's attorneys and with the owners and the trustees, so Zions National Bank, to kind of put together what that would look like and how we can do it legally. And so I don't know if you guys remember or not, but this was an additional kind of memorandum of understanding, and basically what happens is if Aspen Ridge were to default on its lease or cease to operate or do those types of things, the district basically has 4 options at its disposal to look at to see which one it would want to take, if any. We're not obligated to take any. One is the right to assume a lease, so we could take over the Aspen Ridge lease because the charter school isn't the owner of the building. There's a building corporation that's the owner of the building, so we could take over the lease and just continue to operate. We could use the building for any of a variety of district operations, including a school, but we would just assume the lease and we would just continue to pay a lease on it. We could, we have the right to assume the deed of trust, so that means that we can go work with them to take kind of ownership over from the owners, which in this case is the building corp. So we can take that over and we can take the deed of trust over, which means then we would take on all of the principal and interest payments on the bonds. So we would take on their debt at the rate that it currently is. We have the right of first offer, which as long as there's bonds out there, we would take over, and we would basically pay off the principal and interest, any defeasance costs, any liens, and we could purchase the building outright by paying off the principal and interest, paying off those bonds. If there are no bonds outstanding, then the price would be based on fair market value. So we would have an assessor, appraiser go in and say, here's how much it's worth, and that's what we would buy it for. I think they have bonds through 2035 or something. They just issued in 2015. So it would take quite a while for those principal and interest, the bonds to go away. And then the fourth option would be the right of first refusal. So if they cease to operate, somebody came in with a bona fide offer and said, here's how much we want here's how much we'll pay you to take ownership of the building. We would have the right of first refusal to say, no, we want to match those conditions and we want to buy the building outright ourselves. So those are kind of the four options, and that's how it was pursued and pushed, and the attorneys worked together to figure out how this could all work so that we were safe in terms of taking on this construction project and being able to manage our best interests if something were to happen to Aspen Ridge Preparatory School.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that explanation, because it is, as you pointed out, rather unique, and you know, it is a big investment, so we appreciate that background. Any other questions?
I would just say thank you for that explanation, and it's clear then that we still, at every point in the project, have an opportunity to retain the public value of our investment of $4 million and change at this point in that project, so that the public investment remains a public asset that we can protect over time should should something less than desirable happen to the project or operation. Is that correct?
Yes, and if you would like, I can forward you, I think I have the agreement, so I can forward anybody who wants an agreement to look at it, I can forward it to you.
Thanks.
All right, if there are no other questions, then I'll ask for approval of 8.2, approval to amend the construction manager general contract Aspen Ridge Preparatory School addition and renovation.
So moved.
By John. By Paula. I got that right. And Barb, would you please call for the vote?
Mr. Ahrens.
Aye.
Dr. Martyr.
Yes.
Ms. Pierce.
Aye.
Mrs. Ragland.
Yes.
Ms. Segrist.
Aye.
Mrs. Cisco.
Aye.
And Mr. Smith.
Yes. Thank you very much. 8.3 is approval of selection and contract award for the construction manager general contractor for the Alpine Fall River Legacy and Prairie Ridge renovation projects.
Right. Thanks, Bob. And so, on these projects, all of these schools are identical. The projects are essentially identical as well. There are some nuances, difference. So we've combined them all together into one project, and we would like to hire FCI to complete that project for us. Our plan is to have one management group manage all four projects, and so we anticipate an economy of scale, as well as increased quality, just for the fact that of course, you make a mistake on the first one, you're not going to make it on the next three. So that's why we did it that way, and that is the request.
Yeah, makes all the sense in the world.
Just a quick one. Is this the contractor that has done work for us in other security camera installations?
This is a general contractor. They have not done security camera work per se, and so this isn't necessarily security camera work. I probably should explain that. So what this is for is to rebuild the entryways to make secure entries into the buildings. And so at two of the schools, which is Legacy and Prairie Ridge, we'll be rebuilding the entryway, and we'll be building another classroom, a new classroom.
similar to Blue Mountain and Eagle Crest?
Actually identical in that regard, and it is the same contractor that did those
Yeah,
projects.
that was my question. I should have phrased it differently. Thanks.
All right. Other questions? All right. Otherwise, then I'll ask for a motion to approve selection of contract. Selection and contract award for the for Alpine Fall River Legacy and Prairie Ridge renovation projects.
So moved.
By Joey.
Second.
By Dick. And Barb, would you please call for the vote?
Mr. Aaron's.
Aye.
Dr. Martyr.
Yes.
Ms. Pierce.
Aye.
Mrs. Ragland.
Yes.
Ms. Seacrest.
Aye.
Mrs. Cisco.
Aye.
And Mr. Smith.
Yes. Thank you. All right. 8.4, acceptance of the District Charter Schools 2017 fiscal year assurances for financial accreditation.
Yeah, so if you remember, last board meeting, we brought forward the district's financial assurances for accreditation. This is similar to that. It asks the same questions, but each charter school is required to complete this. And you're not asked to approve it tonight, you're asked to accept it. Basically just saying you acknowledge you've seen it. It's just kind of allowing you to know some information into the financial controls that charter schools have. I mean, there's not really much in here in terms of actually looking at how they're doing financially, other than yes or no questions. But as you look through them, there's a couple of them. We talked about building corps, and so those are outside ownerships, and so you'll see some of them where the charter schools actually have a negative deficit balance in their building fund because they've built a building. They're still paying on the bonds, but they're depreciating at a quicker value, and so they're going to be negative until they pay off more and more of those bonds, or the principal on those bonds. And so as you look through that, you'll notice that three of our schools did very well. They didn't have any incidences of no's. We had a couple that just had a couple of them. And then we had one that I would say some new financial leadership and just made some small errors that they're going to correct moving forward. So, what will happen with all of this is we'll send this off to the state. The state will then come back with a combined letter to us. They're trying to move it forward, so it could be January or February. And if they consider any of these critical, they'll let us know in the letter. So we can address it at that point. But for now, this is just kind of to give you an overview of the financial controls within the charter schools.
So Aspen Ridge is one of those charter schools that has issued its own bond.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And that's the reason for their negative position in the building fund.
Exactly. And so that the other issues that they had were using for the 3% Tabor reserve, they used the revenues instead of expenses, which was off by $10,000 or something. I mean, that's a pretty small error, but it's one they need to fix and move forward with. So, but yeah, the reason for them having that in that case is because of their building privilege.
Thanks.
Question. Any? So I take it, Greg, you and Don are comfortable with these reports?
Yeah, I think we're comfortable with the financial, at this point, with the financial status and what's been provided to us by all of the charter schools.
Just quick, you have received financial statements in addition to this kind of summary report.
Absolutely, we have their CAFR. We have to roll their consolidated annual financial report up into ours, so it's part of our report to the state. So, yeah, I think at this point there are no concerns.
All right, very good. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'll ask for a motion to approve the acceptance of the District Charter Schools 2017 year fiscal assurances.
So.
Okay. By Paul. Joey seconded it, and so if you would please call for the vote.
Mr. Aaron's.
Aye.
Dr. Martyr.
Yes.
Ms. Pierce.
Aye.
Mrs. Ragland. Ms. Seacrest.
Aye.
Mrs. Cisco. Aye. And Mr. Smith.
Yes. 8.5, approval of certification of the 2017 mill levies. That's it, 2017 mill levies. Yeah, keep reading. Questions? Good resource here.
I've got some information for you. All right.
Go for it.
So, as you may know, the district is required to certify our taxing mill levy rates to each of the 4 counties in which we reside each year by December 15th. Those rates are based on and apply to the 2017 assessed valuation amounts, which the counties are required to certify to us by December 10th. So the timeline results in a small 5-day window each December when we must calculate these mill levy rates based on the final assessed valuations, certify them, and return them to the counties. So this action satisfies that requirement. To give you a recap of the changes and the implications of the mill levy rates that we're putting forward today for certification, compared to last year, the district's net assessed valuation upon which these mill levy rates are calculated increased by 8.14% across the 4 counties to more than $3.2 billion. For a new board member, I just wanted to reiterate assessed valuation is really, it's a percentage of the taxable percentage of our market valuation. So if someone's house is worth $450,000, the county assessor will multiply that by the assessment rate, which at the moment is 7.2%. They'll get the assessed valuation, and it's that assessed valuation upon which these mill levy rates are calculated. So when I talk about assessed valuation, it's the total accumulation within the district of all of these amounts, this assessment, both on commercial and residential. So let me proceed with that, and then I'll answer any questions you have here at the end. So compared to last year, again, we're up by 8.14% across all 4 counties. That's a total of $3.2 billion. The most significant change was a 13.62% increase in Boulder County. Boulder County makes up about 61.2% of the district's total assessed valuation. Weld County's assessed valuation remained essentially flat compared to last year, seeing an increase of 0.4%. And Weld County makes up about 38.4% of the district's total AV. Larimer County within our district went up by 8.9%, and the city and county of Broomfield went up by 19.8%. However, the area of these counties that fall within our district is really quite small compared to Boulder and Weld. So both Larimer and Broomfield counties combined add up to less than 0.5% of our total AV. So thus, these increases, while notable, affected our overall AV growth only slightly. So we use these county assessed valuation numbers to calculate our mill levy rates, which ultimately determines the amount of money that is generated by local property tax to help fund the education programs at St. Vrain Valley Schools. In 2017, we calculated those rates to a total of 56.394 mills, which is levied the same across all 4 counties. The rate comprises 4 categories as follows. Now I'm on the memo from the board packet. So first we have the general fund levy, which when combined with the state equalization and specific ownership tax revenue makes up the district's total program as determined by the Colorado Department of Education. So this levy rate, the general fund levy, is locked per statute at 24.995 mills as it has been since 2006. This will generate $80.7 million, up from $74.7 million last year. Because of the nature of the interaction of this mill levy rate with the School Finance Act and the state funding formula, the district will not directly see a benefit from this increase, since the state will proportionately reduce its equalization amount to arrive at our predetermined total program funding. We talked about that previously. I think we've got a good grasp on that. It's kind of complicated at the state level, and it's a little seems disappointing. Like, hey, we generated this additional amount for our taxpayers. Why does it come directly to us? And really what it's doing is funding the entire state education system that goes into that total program calculation. So it does indirectly benefit us. The second mill levy rate is our voter-approved mill levy overrides. These are voter-approved property taxes that go directly to our district to support additional educational needs. This flows directly to us. Both of our ballot measures were worded in terms of fixed mills rather than fixed dollar amounts, so these MLO revenues fluctuate in proportion with assessed valuation. Our mill levy our MLO rates continue the same as last year. So our 2008 MLO remains at 7.32 mils, and our 2012 MLO will remain at 6.27 mils. So combined is the amount that you see there on the memo of 13.59 mils. That will generate $43.9 million, which is an increase of $3.3 million from last year. The third mill levy category is our tax credit, rebate, and abatement levy. This levy results from a property owner who successfully contests their tax payments or otherwise receives an abatement in a previous year's property tax assessment. So when this happens, the property tax payment isn't received by the county in that year, but then that amount is reallocated to the rest of the tax base the following year within the district, and that results in this abatement levy. So due to a decrease in tax abatements last year compared to the year before, this abatement levy is actually going down and is calculated at 0.259 mils, down from 0.81 mils last year. So this is a decrease of 0.551 mils, and that 0.259 mils in this calculation will generate about $837,000. So the last mill levy category is our bond redemption levy. This levy is strictly used only to fund the repayment of voter-approved bonds that were issued for building, remodeling, and refurbishing schools. This mill rate is set at 17.55 mils, which is the same as last year. This mill rate will generate $56.7 million and will be sufficient to service the district's current principal and interest payments for the upcoming year. So based on these rates, it is recommended that the district set its total mill levy to 56.394 mils. Again, that's down from 56.945 mils last year, which is a difference of 0.551 mils. That difference being entirely attributable to the abatement levy we spoke about earlier. Combined, this mill levy rate will generate approximately $182.2 million across the 4 counties, which is up from $170.1 million last year. That's all the numbers. I know if I threw a lot at you, but please, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Well, it's broken out, laid out very nicely, so we appreciate that. Questions? Paul?
I don't have any questions. I was just going to share the input from Finance and Audit.
Great.
Because Tony went over this before this December 10th final assessment, assessed values came in, and after the December 10th values came in. But he went through it in quite a bit of detail with our Finance and Audit Committee, kind of showing us a spreadsheet and breaking it down by county and breaking it down by year, and kind of walking through how all these mills are calculated. So I really want to thank you for that, because you are self-deprecating. You always say it's very boring. I don't find it very boring.
Oh, great. I'm glad to hear that.
It's a lot of money.
I don't think it's boring. I really find it interesting as well.
It's a lot of money. It's real money, and I really appreciate your explanation about how, yes, our assessed valuation is going up, but those fixed mills, we don't keep that money. Like, it goes to the state, and that gets redistributed to the state. And there's just so many moving parts in this that I appreciate your explanation. And one thing you didn't touch on, but I'll just elaborate on for the public, was the changing factor for the assessed valuation because of the Gallagher amendment kicking in this year. Like last year at this time, everyone gets the assessed valuation on their house, but in reality, we were only taxed on 7.96% of the total value of our house. You get the value of your house, you apply that factor to it, and then you start paying taxes on that. That number went down because of Gallagher, which has to have a particular balance between residential and commercial property values. That's the law in this land. So it went down to 7.2. So all of our taxpayers now have a value on their property, residential property. They are now only paying taxes on 7.2% of the value of that property. And that's what these factors, these mills apply toward. Our commercial property owner friends have a harder time of things. Their assessed value is still at 29%? 29, is that right? So they do pay over 3 times on the value of their property than residential people do. So just thank you for the evaluation. I'm pleased to see that the tax rates are actually going down in the abatement portion. But I think it's really important to notice, like in the bond fund, we have a strong balance there. We're managing that money really well. That looks back to all of our prior bond issues, which some of them are up to 15 years old now, and into 20 years in the future, like how to best spend that bond money and that investment. So I appreciate all the conversation around that as well. So do you have anything else, Joey?
No, I don't think I have anything to add. I do think that the community members that serve on finance and audit ask fantastic questions. They provide a lot of thoughtful feedback and input, and they didn't have any concerns or questions regarding the two conversations at the two different meetings that were had. Actually, their feedback is incredibly positive for how the district is managing all of the funds in addition to these mills. And so I don't think I have anything other than that. Very helpful.
Thank you. I just had a comment that comes back to last year, and I guess the year before as well, that as we set the mill levy for repayment bonds, that is done intentionally to, my understanding is we have set that so that it does not fluctuate from year to year. And in some years, we're going to collect a little more money for the fund. In other years, we may not collect as much, but the idea is to maintain for our taxpayers some certainty about what that mill levy rate is going to be. And I wanted to, I guess, express my appreciation as both a taxpayer and a board member for managing that part of our tax assessments in a way that provides some certainty for both the district and our taxpayers. So thank you.
You're welcome. We did do some extensive review of that mill levy redemption rate to make sure we had a lot of intentionality with making sure we were managing that as best we could. So,
yeah. May I ask, are we comfortable with where we stand with that fund based on this projection going, what, 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, very much so. And I wanted to preface this comment. I think it's very important to mention and reiterate to the public that that particular mill levy rate for the bond redemption fund is strictly for the repayment of bonds. So any up-down that we speak about is held in reserve and is always used and put towards future payment of bonds if there's that reserve. So as we do our analysis, we do a long-term projection of future debt service needs, as well as the consideration of the future issuance of the remaining $60 million for the 2016 voter-approved bonds that haven't been issued yet. And the future needs that we'll need to have in order to service that debt. We've done some projections with Don and with Greg and made sure that 17.55 was adequate. And indeed, the reserves in that fund will also help us to be able to offset the future principal payments that we're going to be making to help make sure that we're not paying too much interest on the repayment of that debt.
And when we're looking at that time frame that you're doing projections over, is how many years?
Well, the projections that we have include the entire repayment cycle of all of our bonds, so it's actually as long as 30 years in some cases. And we acknowledge that things change even on a year-to-year basis, and so our time horizon of the projections that we're looking at are most effective in the next 5 years or so.
Yeah, our projections, what we've built, we could do it differently, but it is basically current year and then the next 5 years, and trying to kind of level load that. So if we are going to issue $60 million more, we kind of want to keep it stable so that to accommodate that in case assessed valuation were to do something negatively, right? To decrease or something along those lines. So we really look at that 5 year and try to say, are we good for the next 5 years with this mill levy certification? And if we are, then that's what we set it to. And then the following year, we look at the next 5 years.
Thanks very much.
All right, yeah, thank you for answering those questions. Paula, thanks for those comments. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the respect that group has for our finance team. I've been around a number of finance teams over the years, and you guys are absolutely fantastic. So thank you for all your work. If there are no other questions, I'll ask for a motion to approve the certification of the 2017 mill levies.
So moved.
By Paula.
Second.
by Dick. And Barb, would you please call for the vote?
Mr. Ahrens.
Aye.
Dr. Martyr.
Yes.
Ms. Pierce.
Aye.
Mrs. Ragland.
Yes.
Ms. Seegers.
Aye.
Mrs. Cisco.
Aye.
And Mr. Smith.
Yes. Thank you very much. All right. Action item 8.6, the approval of the memorandum of understanding between the Education Foundation for the St. Vrain Valley Schools and the St. Vrain Valley School District. And Brandon, welcome. Thank you for being here. And first, let me congratulate you on just a really incredible event. I don't know that we gave it the recognition that it deserved, but it was really incredible. Great turnout. Was that a record turnout?
Well, I guess so. It was the second year we've done it, so we beat the first year.
Okay.
We had about 520 people there. So
Yeah, that was great.
That was fun.
All right.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And thank you for giving me a couple of minutes this evening. As you've already made reference to, we have hired a new executive director. I say we, I'm wearing my Education Foundation hat. The Education Foundation for the St. Vrain Valley has hired a new executive director, Josh Atherton, and we've made arrangements for him to present or introduce himself before the board on the January 10th meeting. So he'll be there. And part of my transition out of that role and back to the real world, I guess, is just some cleanup items that we need to take care of. And one of them is this revised memorandum of understanding with the school district. As we reviewed our operations and some of the things that we needed to do to restructure the foundation, we also realized that we probably need to go in and revise some of the provisions in the memorandum of understanding. There are two things in particular that we really focused on. One is the financial arrangement that was in place between the foundation and the school district. The other has to do with the flyer program. And I think there are some of you who have received some emails from constituents and that sort of thing about what's going on with the flyer program. So we can talk about that, but we're trying to address those issues as well. The financial piece in the past, the district has been tremendously supportive of the foundation, of course, and still, from an in-kind contribution of office space at the Lincoln School and in so many different ways, the foundation benefits from the support, in-kind support of the school district. One of the things that the district has also done in the past is in-kind and employee. So an employee on loan is basically what it was called in the previous contract. So past executive directors, for example, were actually had contracts with the school district, and then their job was to go work for the Education Foundation, essentially. We didn't think that was the healthiest arrangement moving forward, and thought it made a lot of sense to allow the foundation board to hire and pay their executive director. That said, there was a financial hole, gap in terms of where the foundation was in their ability to support a staff in an independent way, given the nature of the benefit they were receiving from the school district in the past to now. So instead of just turning that off, we decided to step that down over a couple of years until it goes to zero. Instead of paying for an employee, basically the foundation would receive grant funding for over a 3-year period. The first year, 2017-18, it would be $200,000. That is starting in July of this fiscal year. So any amount of money that was advanced by the school district already to this point would be backed out of that amount. So it wouldn't be a full $200,000 at this point of the cycle. In fiscal year 18-19, it would be $150,000 grant, and then in 19-20, it would be a $75,000 grant. And thereafter, the foundation would be entirely on its own for supporting its staff. So that was one major change that we made in the MOU. The other, dealing with the flyer program, some of you may be aware, we advertise that we do a flyer program, and we manage that through the Education Foundation. Our attorneys saw that announcement and said, wait, time out, you're not allowed to do this. And they pointed to a couple of board policies and and a variety of other things. And so we have not been managing the flyer program for the last 6 months, or maybe it's a little less than that. In the interim, we sat down with the church and said, okay, this is a service that is really really important. I think there are a lot of businesses in our community who rely on this as a means to communicate what they're doing, and it also is a lot. It's a way to structure and organize some of the communication that's coming into the school district. Working with Matt Wiggins and others with the communications office, there's a lot that goes into managing these requests that the district receives, and the foundation, I think, provides a very important service in managing that, so that the communications office doesn't have to focus on that kind of thing. Long story short, I'm sorry it's already been a long story, so maybe it's too late. But we sat down with our attorneys and we figured out, okay, here's how we can do this and make this work. We put some of the provisions into the MOU. That was one of the things. We had to have a specific agreement with the school district that specified how we were going to do the flyer program going forward. Also on January 10th, there are a couple of changes that modifications we'll have to make to a few of the board policies. And working together, the agreement that we're putting in the MOU now and the changes that we'll make on January 10th, working together will fix the issues that we had before and we'll really go on as business as usual after that is all in place. So those are the two things that MOU addresses, and I'd be happy to take any questions from that.
Well, I appreciate that explanation, and the foundation is highly valued by the board. We really appreciate the work that it does, and particularly the way it has really stepped up over the last couple of years, and your interim leadership has been very helpful. So thank you very, very much, and that's a great explanation. Questions, comments?
Thank you, Bob. Yeah, I reiterate that. Thank you very much for stepping up and taking charge or control of the Ed Foundation in the interim. I think maybe the question we'll all have is, with all the shifting parts that are taking place, it's quite an undertaking for anyone taking the helm. And we do appreciate that the Ed Foundation does play a pivotal role here throughout the district. Well, you now have set the bar of 200 down to 75 to 0 over the course of the next few years. What are the pullbacks on that in case they do not meet that criteria to be self-sustaining in that amount of time?
It's an excellent question, and frankly one that I'm not sure the finance committee for the foundation has fully vetted. I think it is important that we only spend, we have a burn rate that we can sustain in our spending, and we saw we've seen that we've kind of money in, money out has been kind of the routine, and so one of the reasons we're having to revisit this MOU and some of the practices is for fiscal stability and responsibility moving forward. We have grown some of our events to a point where they've been much more lucrative than they have been in the past. We've added events that have allowed the foundation to generate more revenue moving forward, and we'll just need to continue to do that in order to maintain a business model. And it's really all it is running a small business when you're over there, watching your cash flow on a daily, weekly basis, and that's what we'll have to do moving forward. It was very educational for me, moving from the position of oversight on a board to spending 6 months actually in the driver's seat, managing the funds and watching the bank accounts and writing the checks and doing all the things that we do. I was actually very surprised by how much money is coming in and how much money is going out. And I think it's there, the balance is there. What I am confident of is that we also have a very energetic and enthusiastic new executive director who has big plans. And I think that's exciting as well.
I'm glad you got into the weeds and also had that 30,000-foot view of it, which was important, because I always perceived it as being money in and money out, to almost a zero balance at the end of the year. I'm not sure that's a correct view or not, but that would be worrisome if that was the case in terms of trying to run under a small business model, because it's not. It sustains an important part throughout the district.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bob. I'm pleased in the direction we're headed with regard to our relationship with the Education Foundation through this new memorandum of understanding, clearly delineating the respective responsibilities. So I think that's a very positive step forward. And I have a follow-up question. I really have two questions. One relates directly to John's concern. Is it the view of the Foundation Board that a 3-year phase-out of support is a reasonable time frame?
Yes, I think that was part of the discussion we had with Great Feet and others when we were, discussing the revision, that, this is something that we expect of our own, or again, wearing the foundation hat when I say our, this is something that the foundation expects of its staff moving forward, frankly, that there's a larger emphasis on fundraising and sustainability, and a reduction of overhead costs, frankly, in order to help us meet those objectives.
Thank you. And Greg, did staff agree with that assessment?
Yes, I believe so. Don and I talked about it, worked together on it.
Sorry, I should have asked you, Don.
I think what Brandon is saying as well is when we first went into the agreement with the Ed Foundation a couple of years ago, if we would have kept to that agreement, the money flow would stop now. Right? Unfortunately, the Ed Foundation was not able to generate the type of funding and the funds that they would have needed to be self-sustaining. And the district did quite a bit of backfilling with work, backfilling with support, backfilling with dollars, backfilling with donations. So as we've changed leadership, we wanted to give the new leadership a chance, but to be very clear that we are not here to support the Ed Foundation.
Right.
The Ed Foundation is here to support the schools. And so the hard answer to your question is, if we get to that point and we don't find that, then we have to ask the question, what's the future of the Ed Foundation? And so it really is something that we've agreed that this is the way that it needs to move forward. And I, like Brandon, am really excited about the new executive director, and I'm very, very optimistic and confident that they'll be able to meet that challenge.
Thank you. Yeah, I know Josh, Josh Atherton, in his work in the nonprofit community over time. He's also the husband of one of our esteemed former employees at Longmont High School in the science department, and now working for the district's technology part. So I'm also very optimistic about that. My other question is with regard to a specific provision in the memorandum of understanding. It's 1.6.4, and it talks about doing district-approved background checks of the employees of the foundation. That seems to be a rather unusual provision for a memorandum of understanding between two independent organizations. Could you give me some background about why that's present?
Absolutely. The foundation employees operate in a school building. The Lincoln School. Obviously, there are children in that building, but it is a school building. And foundation employees on any given day will be in and out of actual schools in the district. So we thought it made a lot of sense for them to meet the same bar, the same requirements as any district employee in terms of background checks if they're going to have interactions.
I can see that initially, but an annual check seems somewhat invasive.
So what happens for any district employee, HR does an annual run, background initial, or I don't even know what it's called, but kind of they pull down any updates to your background check for every employee in the district. They do that annually, and they're able to do that kind of without any disruption to individuals. You don't even know it's happening because you're registered through HR here at the district. The way we've hired Josh and the way we'll hire future foundation employees, we're hiring them directly to the foundation, and they're not going through HR over here. So the only way we get that annual update is if we require them to go into HR and say, hey, it's August, I need my annual check, will you run my background check? And so that's why it is a unique provision, because it's a unique situation. And that's how we get them current, just like any other employee in the district.
Well, thank you. That's news to me that I was having an annual background check when I was an employee of the district. But I think that's a much needed provision. And I was, as long as it's the same provision we have for our district employees, my question goes, the underlying reason for my question goes away.
Right.
So thank you.
And Bob, I just want to reiterate the thanks to Brandon for the work that he's done, because he's pretty modest. He took on a pretty significant challenge and has done a great job and spent a lot of time creating a positive situation.
It's not easy to step into a role like that, not having a background in that area, and the job that you've done was really stellar. And if anything, our performance improved during your interim management, so that's quite a statement.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks very much for doing that, and I know, Don, you indicated that we backfilled with money and work and all, but over the last several years, I know you've put a lot of yourself into trying to make sure this foundation works, and on behalf of the school district. And if it weren't for that leadership, we wouldn't be where it is. All right. Well, with that, then I'll ask for a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding between the Education Foundation and the school district.
So moved.
By Dick and seconded by Amory. And Barb, would you please call for the vote?
Mr. Aaron's.
Aye.
Dr. Martyr.
Yes.
Ms. Pierce. Aye. Mrs. Ragland. Ms. Segrist.
Aye.
Mrs. Sisco.
Aye.
And Mr. Smith.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much. We have Brian and Scott here for action item 8.7, which is the adoption of the Erie Pre-K 8 and elementary 27 attendance boundaries. Before we give you guys an opportunity to speak, I just want to thank you both very much and recognize your work, not only in outlining the options, but framing and creating a context for some very helpful and meaningful community discussions. Other folks in the room, members of our staff participated in that. I thought everybody did a great job. It was a team effort. They were well attended, and so were you going to summarize some of that activity?
Yeah.
Great.
We'll try to do maybe a little more condensed version, since we talked last month here at the board and gave you a report. But really this goes back to last year, November 2016, when we passed the bond, and then we began a process of analyzing site locations for future school sites. We held public meetings in April and got input, and those helped frame the initial boundary scenarios that were developed and then taken out in the October public meeting. So really the key issues that we saw was significant overcrowding. Looking at the schools in the Frederick and Erie feeders, in the 5-year time frame coming up, we were probably anywhere from 116% overcapacity to 163%. So the need was clear that we needed to resolve some overcrowding and populate some new schools, relieve the existing schools. So as we developed scenarios based on our public input and from our board policies, we looked at major highways as boundaries. We looked at separation from neighborhoods, natural things like we look at railroad, we look at green space, we look at waterways, all kinds of things that would provide for a good boundary. We look at keeping neighborhoods together wherever possible, and then looking at long-term build-out. As we looked at what had recently happened in those areas, we had added about 1,500 students in the Erie feeder over the last 5 years before, and about 1,000 students in the Frederick Meade area. So I'm going to have Vrain kind of walk us through the boundary maps. We did this last month, but just to kind of refamiliarize yourself with the scenarios that we're talking about, and then I'll highlight some of the features after he walks through the boundaries, and then we'll do the same for elementary 27. So we'll start with the Erie PK8, and then elementary 27, and then we'll kind of wrap it up with the action items that we'll be looking for tonight, because our hope is that we can settle on some boundaries and start the process for staffing and populating the schools. So, all right.
Looks like we pulled up the presentation. Oh, there, I lost it. Oh, there it is. Okay. So, starting with our boundaries, if you'll recall from our last meeting, within each of the boundaries that I'll go over, Erie Elementary is orange, Red Hawk is red, and Black Rock is black. And this map that we have up here in front of you shows the existing boundaries as they are today. Over on the east side, just to acquaint everybody with the area, is I-25. Makes up the eastern boundary for these scenarios. And then we have Highway 52 right across the top portion of the map. And then on the bottom we have State Highway 7 down along Vista Ridge. Excuse me. So moving forward, this is the map that we talked about previously that shows the density of residential development, both existing and planned. The darker the green, the more residential that we're expecting to be built in the area. It also shows our current location of students in densities, from lightest being the least number of students and the darker orange being the most number of students. And what you'll see is the Black Rock area has a number of quite a lot of students in and around Black Rock Elementary, and then up into Red Hawk we have quite a few in Erie Commons, both north and south, and then in the Canyon Creek neighborhoods as well. And then on to our scenarios. The first one, scenario A. The area that we're talking about for the new PK8 in all of these scenarios is shown in blue. And so with this one, we're taking a portion, which is this orange hashed area, from Erie Elementary, and we're including that into the PK8. We're also including a significant portion of Black Rock into scenario A, and then a smaller portion of Red Hawk, which is the Erie Commons South neighborhood. In scenario B, there we go. Scenario B, we have the blue area again. We have a portion of Erie Elementary. Erie Elementary's current boundary stays somewhat similar, with the exclusion of the orange hashed area. Black Rock's attendance area would be Weld County Road 4 on its north side, and it includes the area of Palisade Park. Palisade Park is in Broomfield, and it's currently going through a lot of development, and that is over here on I-25 and Highway 7. Up in Red Hawk, we include Erie Commons North in this scenario, as well as Erie Commons South. In scenario C, we move the proposed boundary for the PK8 to Highway 52, and then also it follows. It follows I-25, and to the south, it also includes Palisade Park in Broomfield, and then it also, in all three of these scenarios, all three scenarios include Vista Point neighborhood as well. In this one, the only area of Red Hawk that is included is the Grandview neighborhood. So that is our three scenarios. I think Scott.
So to break down the scenarios a little bit, we talked a little bit about this earlier, that the growth in this area has gone from 2,674 students in 2011 to 4,137 students in 2017. So average growth of 244 new students every year in this area. Strong housing concentrations we saw on the map around Black Rock and Red Hawk, as well as in Vista Point, Grandview, and Erie Commons. And then fast growth is starting to occur in the Colliers Hill and Erie Highlands, the new areas that are very close. So we're seeing strong concentrations of higher density students in those areas. And then Broomfield is the area where it's coming on quickly now as well. So as we looked at the three scenarios, and we have a C/D option, which we talked about last month, and that is what would happen if you put Vista Point back into Black Rock. And we went through the numbers on that a fair bit last meeting. And part of that came out of some of the public meetings where there were significant numbers of Vista Point parents expressing interest in staying in Black Rock. So scenario A and B are similar in some of the impacts at Red Hawk and Erie Elementary and Erie Middle. Scenario C, one of the differences is it brings back an additional population back to Red Hawk. For instance, in B, Red Hawk was potentially brought down to 64%, looking at 2017 numbers. And so this moved Erie Commons back into Red Hawk. Black Rock in C and A becomes maybe a more long-term boundary. There may be a chance that it doesn't have to be impacted by boundary changes down the road. However, if you, in the CD version where you put Vista Point back into Black Rock, then you run into some trouble with capacity again for Black Rock longer term, and future boundary changes then would likely be needed in the Black Rock area. You can see in the lines here, the second line, student build-out estimate, is the number of potential students based on what we know from comprehensive plans in the area. So for Black Rock, if you put Vista Point back in, there's a potential for 830 students at full build-out in that area, which would keep it over capacity. Erie, the new PK8 in that scenario would be very low at 50% in the DU version. They would be in the 54 to 75, depending on how open enrollment is going. And I understand from Cyrus that they have over 200 applications right now for open enrollment. So they're going to have a pretty good number, I think, to start with. So that's a quick summary, maybe a little briefer than last month, but overall, the guiding notion that we have is there will be more schools in this area built and more boundary changes. So this may be a 5-year timeline, depending on where growth happens in Will County. 29,000 housing units are at full build out in this area. Yeah, question? Okay. The comments received, we attached all those at the back of your packet, and a lot of the questions related around transportation, location issues, and that may be a question that you'll be addressing is, if you do grandfather some open enrollment, what is the position on transporting them for a period of time if they wanted to come back to their home school? In the past, we've done it on occasion and for a year time frame to bridge into the following years. So that's a quick overview of the PK8. So now we'll walk you through the 27 boundaries and that information.
You guys want to do the second one now, or do you want to ask questions around this one?
Okay, I see a lot of nodding heads.
Yeah.
Moving forward. Okay. All right. So with this map, Centennial will in the subsequent maps be red. Legacy will be black, and Erie Elementary will continue to be orange. So, and these are our current boundaries as well. And again, I-25 is here in the center of the map, and then Highway 52. We'll be talking a little bit about Highway 52 as I move through these scenarios. So Highway 52 is here, and then Weld County Road 7 is here, and the school that Elementary 27 that's being built is right about here. So in Windham Hill neighborhood is in this area. Idaho Creek is up here in the northwest corner, and so forth. So moving forward. So the next map again shows the residential development planned and also existing for this area. What you'll notice is that there's a concentration of future residential development down around the Windham Hill neighborhood along Highway 52 and I-25. Some development is planned in the Idaho Creek area as well. And over in the Tri-Town areas, there will be significant amounts of development occurring along Weld County Road 11 as well. And then this also shows the current placement of where our current students are living and their densities as well. And my daughter, coming out of Westview Middle School, told me that this is also called a bow echo if we're thinking about weather. So there's that for you. Okay, so moving into the scenarios. Okay, scenarios. Okay, so scenario A shows our planned elementary school, or scenario A in blue, taking up a significant portion of Centennial Elementary, and that is in the red hashed area. Legacy Elementary again is black, and it's shown in the black hashed area. Erie Elementary, that's being contributed into this scenario, is in the orange hashed area. I should note that everything on all schools east of I-25 will remain as they are. And so we're just talking about portions of those attendance areas west of I-25 throughout these three scenarios. Moving on to scenario B. In this scenario, the difference is we are not taking any of Erie Elementary into the new PK or elementary 27 attendance area. And then in scenario C, we are making the southern boundary Highway 52. And one of the things we heard in the community was that they liked scenario C because they view Highway 52 as unsafe for crossing, whether that's in a bus, a car, walking, biking, and so forth. And so they liked the Highway 52 as the boundary for the southern portion of Elementary 27. And so in this portion, we take the area of Erie Elementary north of Highway 52 and put that into the Elementary 27 boundary also.
I guess important to note that if you selected a scenario A for the PK, you would also select a scenario A for the 27 because they fit together on the north. So we have seen a growth of 964 students in this area, and with concentrations of students on the west side of I-25 in the maps that Ryan was showing. One of the difficult things in relieving Centennial and Legacy was if you crossed east, you were so very close to the schools with the student densities. So I-25 became a pretty good solid line and boundary for this this development. So as we look at the three scenarios, you can see that Centennial has a significant build out, another 3,383 students in that area, Legacy 6,000. Much of that is on the east side of I-25. But with the relief provided here, we get those schools down, potentially Legacy under 100%, Centennial 109 to 112%. And those are all the same in every scenario. The big change is for the south with what you do with Erie and Elementary 27. And this brings the population of Elementary 27 potentially around 60 to 65%. Depending on open enrollment, they could be smaller or larger. But they will have room to grow. And it will be a benefit to the existing schools in the area. You can see that build out in the Frederick area, 41,000 homes, in the Meade, 47,000 homes that build out. Whether those happen or not, that's, I guess, a conjecture based on the current comprehensive plan. One other kind of housekeeping item is the high school, the secondary boundaries. There are no changes to the middle school boundaries other than the area that's pulled out of Erie Middle to go to the K-8. They go to the K-8, but Coleridge and Meade Middle or all the other middles that might be impacted, there's no change to those. So I guess that the area that we're talking about is the Windham Hill area that's north of Highway 52. That would remain in Erie Middle and Erie High School. And there's one small hatched area that is kind of a remnant of the Frederick High boundary as part of the Legacy. We're proposing there that it would be attached to the Meade High attendance boundary. A lot of the students are already open enrolling to Meade High in that area, so it probably made sense to consolidate that area west of I-25 into the Meade or the Erie area is what we have there. So I think we're at a point where we can answer any questions. This outlines your decision points for tonight. Adopt a boundary plan for the Erie PK8, scenario A, B, or C, or some variation. Same for Elementary 27. Adopt the minor modification of the high school boundary from Frederick into Meade. And then any actions around open enrollment, grandfathering of students, and transportation. In your board packet, we didn't really highlight this, but there was some information on open enrollment. We do grandfather 4th graders who are going to go into 5th grade and 7th graders going into 8th grade. So they would have the right to open enroll back to their home school if they were changed. The sibling rule doesn't apply, but there is an appeal process through the assistant superintendent, that a sibling could also stay if they had a 4th or 7th grader who was going into 5th and 8th. So if you chose to do anything other than those, then we would probably want some action on that open enrollment determination. So be glad to answer any questions.
I have a question, Scott.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for putting all of this together. It's been amazing, and you've definitely given us a lot to look over for a number of weeks. And I do have one question, and I think I had heard this at one point, that elementary 27 would be a feeder for Erie and Frederick. Is that true?
Right. The if we go back to, you can see in the high school map, the bottom half of 27 would go into Erie Middle and Erie High, which is the way it is right now.
Mm-hmm.
And the top half would go into Coleridge, which is its current, and Meade High, which is its current. And the only change in secondary would be that little kind of rectangular shape with the corner off that would go from Frederick to Meade.
So it's going to be Erie Meade feeder,
Right.
not Erie Frederick feeder.
Right. Except for the Coleridge Middle, that stays the same. See, that the original Centennial was a split feeder as well. Centennial goes to Coleridge and then to Meade. Wyndham Hill right now goes to Legacy, but they go to Erie Middle and Erie High. So a lot of this is because the density of development didn't happen like adjacent to other development. It's kind of leapfrog, across the interstate, across into feeders. Once this area builds out, this kind of 27 area could be its own cohesive feeder. There will be a high school there, there'll be a middle school, there'll be other elementaries. But we're kind of in the in-between, where there's not enough growth for it to be its own concise feeder.
Mm-hmm.
So we're left with a little bit of splitting feeders to make numbers work. So that happens when growth is jumping ahead of other areas, and it's skipping large tracts of vacant land, moving into feeders that Frederick wasn't originally west of the interstate, but then they entered into the Erie feeder when they annexed west of the interstate. So we have communities that don't match their original feeders.
So I guess, because I don't understand, I mean, I understand what you're saying, I think, but for elementary 27, as a staff, who do they identify with? Which feeder? Does that make sense? Is that
Yeah, and we do have those situations. We have Longmont High, which has a shared feeder with Westview. So Longmont Estates goes to Westview, but then they go to Silver Creek instead of Longmont High. That was one of our other split feeders, and part of that is that Longmont High has 5 elementaries, and Silver Creek only has 2 elementaries feeding it. You have to find ways to balance numbers as they move through the system. And this Legacy was one of those situations at the time. Frederick was a middle senior, he didn't have the space. Erie had the space. So there were all kinds of complications around this. If everyone arrived in good, nice packages in good locations, this would be pretty easy, right? We're in an in-between time for the feeders, but it will, over time, work out.
Don, I'll ask you if you have any comments, but let me see if there are any other questions or any other things. I do want to, again, it strikes me that you guys have made such genuine and rather thorough efforts to reconcile these numerous variables, right?
Right.
Geographic, et cetera. And indeed multiple perspectives, and I was really impressed with the way that the dialogue and the discussion took place. Was there a sense on the part of staff, or maybe Don, I'll ask you this, that came out of those discussions on the part of the community, or were you going to make a recommendation on which of these options we should go with?
Yeah, the main concern for parents is disrupting their friendships and schools that they've already been there in the kind of situation, the comfort level that they had, and then the transportation issues with the open enrollment piece. Those seem to be the primary concerns. I think for us, one of the challenges is trying to accommodate today and not create a decision today that we find ourselves in a very difficult situation in tomorrow, and then have to start readjusting and readjusting and readjusting. And the boundary decisions are one of those things where you, not unlike any other decision, you're making a decision that has long-term ramifications. So the challenge for us is to do that while simultaneously accommodating and supporting parents who are caught in that system today. We don't want to disrupt their children either. So one of the things we talked about was, one, the open enrollment, and two, the opportunity for some transportation, so that it doesn't place a hardship on people. So, and we did talk about the recommendation that we had. Scott, if you want to present that, we do have a scenario that we're recommending.
I will add to the scenario that was favored by our transportation department, the scenario C, from an operational standpoint. One of the concerns with, from school staff perspective of variation with D with Vista Point, State, and Black Rock was the low population for the Erie PK8 to start with, and being able to staff a middle school program and then the overcrowding that leaves at the middle, Erie Middle. So those were some of the concerns and maybe some of the pros to scenario C. Also the clean line of Highway 52 between them. But there are ways to make any of these scenarios work. The complication is how does open enrollment affect it? The benefit is that we're creating space. So I think we have plenty of opportunity for parents, families to open enroll where they want. We're adding seats to this, and then there's an overflow school that can, in time, maybe in a couple of years, we'll have a better feel for how growth is occurring and where the needs might be. The overflow school could help assist our situation. If we see some imbalances occur in a certain location, that's been approved in the bond, and it's identified most likely in this Weld County corridor. So, and we have a number of sites that we could draw from that we already own. So that's part of the solution as well.
So that would be your recommendation for C?
Well, it clearly had the most pros of any scenario. So,
all right. And I was going to ask Joey. I wasn't able to be here at the session when you discussed it. I thought maybe I'd ask Joey to comment on some of the dialogue and thoughts.
Sure. I don't know that there's a whole lot to add from the presentation that Scott and Ryan did this evening. I think a few things that we highlighted at the study session were the communication department's diligence in making sure that the board had access and the ability to read every single comment, whether it was a comment made on a sticky note at one of the meetings. It was verbalized, it was emailed, it was a phone call that we've had those, actually we had access to those at the last study session, and they're in our board packet as well. So I would reiterate that. And one thing that Scott and I talked about, and he really already touched on this, because it wasn't immediately obvious to me that A goes with A, B with B, and C with C. So when we're making decisions, there were several, not several, I would say a few parents came advocating for Vista Point to stay at Black Rock, of course, but that when we're making decisions, we're really making decisions, the two schools in conjunction, that we're not making a decision only about the pre-K-8, but that goes hand in hand with elementary 27 as well. And you know, this won't be the last boundary change out in that area. The bond really was passed with the thought that the vast majority of it, I don't know, vast majority is for what, 70% roughly, would go to address overcrowding. And, you know, in closing, the reality is these are great decisions we have in front of us. Having brand new schools, communities that support a bond, brand new schools. This is indicative of schools that are thriving and communities that are thriving. So really it's important for us, given growth, that we do make a boundary decision that Dawn and the staff can really work with to help manage that transition for the families who are affected. But for me, I really want to make sure that we set future boards up to make successful boundary decisions as well. So we need to think about now, but 5, 6 years down the road and what it might look like. So I don't know if you have anything to add. That's brief recap.
I do, Joey. And you know, when I talked with Scott and staff about our recommendation, which is C, the conversations centered around what are the long-term implications, how can we mitigate. We not only heard the transportation, but I think if you recall, one of our parents brought forward the issue of wraparound programs. And so we talked about the possibility of, as everything fleshes out, to see what kinds of programs we need to provide, either temporarily or long-term, to make the move, you know, supportive. Because we really don't want to disrupt families, and I feel like if we can provide the opportunity for them to stay in the school that they're at, provide them with transportation, and give them some of the programming that they might feel they're losing, then they can maintain that stability today, then we can make sure that we make the right decision for not only today but down the road.
Yeah, I'll go to other board members in a moment, but let me give John an opportunity to weigh in. You have comments?
Thank you, Bob. Again, I will reiterate the process that this took, and you know, I'm starting my 5th year on the board, and I will say that from day one, the objective is always the students, and you gave us an outline of student capacity, and I'm amazed year after year you come out with numbers that are less than 1% off of what the actuality is for the year coming. So I can take your numbers with great respect, is that they are true, and they are good to align our judgments with. We started the meeting today with Bob reading the mission statement, and I think 2 things that really stick out for me in the mission statement is learning environment and the highest potential. And with that comes the size of our classrooms, and we really have a sweet spot that we try to not only promote, but really offer our students one where it's not too few students and not too many students. And there's a sweet spot that we try to hit. And one of the areas that I have been reminded of is, you know, we did pass this bond to help with our crowded schools and future development. And I think that's our main goal, is to look at the future and to look at the pathways that will be the feeder systems. and to make it as less disruptive now and also less disruptive in the future. So I think those are our guiding principles at this time right now. Erie has been inundated with growth, and we're not done with growth. So when we make a change, we're still looking at schools that have areas that are building is being done. So our best objective right now is to ease those crowded schools and make it one where we are less disruptive to current families and to future families. And with all the talk that we've had with grandfathering in and open enrollment, and I will remind our parents and students that we are an open enrollment environment, and that's a great opportunity. I'm going to also remind them that we're not trying to mitigate anyone from attending a great school. All of our schools have incredible opportunities for all of our students, and I expect that to be true with our new students just as it is with the students or the schools we have online right now. So looking at safety, looking at boundaries, looking at the pathways, I do think that our best scenario is C also, and I agree with that, and it's with a lot of thought. I mean, we have weighed the options, and we have really vetted all the materials that we've been provided by not only the district but by parents. And so I want to remind them of that this was a decision where we had to look at the large picture of future pathways along with the current crowdedness in the schools. And opening a new school, we want to open it and offer Cyrus and 27 an opportunity to have an environment where there's enough students within the school to really provide educational opportunities, but not make it so large that there's not a chance to have a time of figuring out how the schools work. And I imagine that is going to be an exciting opportunity, but one that we want to foster the best environment that we can. And I think the numbers of C really reflect a scenario that will offer Cyrus a good opportunity to open a school with enough students, but not too crowded where he can't navigate the hallways. So that's my suggestion too, and I am following what you have suggested and what Donna suggested too. I concur and I agree with that.
Any other questions? Well, if there are no other questions, then I'll ask for a motion. John, you want to make a motion then to?
Sure, motion to approve scenario C for the boundary lines.
Okay. And a second?
I'll second.
By Emery. Any further discussion? Oh.
So this is a really important decision, and it affects a lot of children and families. So I just want to weigh in and go on record, just let everybody know kind of where I stand. I will be supporting the motion tonight. I'll be supporting C for many of the reasons that we talked about. But what kind of comes to mind in my decision-making process is that this is very much a quantitative decision, and we've gone through all the numbers. We know what the percentages look like, the number of students, all of that data, but it's equally qualitative decisions. And I just want all of the families who participated throughout this, voted for the bond to start, and then participated in the process throughout the year, that we hear them, and we truly appreciate their input, which is why this is not only a quantitative decision. If it was, honestly, I'd lean more towards A or B, because those numbers are higher as far as giving the school more economies of scale to start. It does more crowding relief in Black Rock and in Erie Middle, but it's not only about the numbers. As much as we love you, it's not only about the numbers. And so what I heard throughout the discussions was that Don and his staff are taking into account the lives of these people and the transportation issues and the safety issues and the wraparound programs. Grandfathering the students, the rising 5th graders and the rising 8th graders into their existing schools so they can stay with their friends and their teachers, and they can move on to the next step with those kids. I have heard from our staff that the qualitative pieces will be addressed. And I have every confidence that that will happen because I've lived through a boundary redesignation. I've seen it done probably more recently at Timberline, among other schools. This isn't our first rodeo as far as reboundaries, and we've proven time and time again that we can do it with fidelity, we can do it with respect for all of the families, and we can make the economics work. So I have every confidence that that is going to happen, and I think C really kind of meets that balance of the quantitative and the qualitative, and sets us up for just being in a strong position in the future, given what we can anticipate at that time. So I'll be supporting the motion.
Yes, thank you, Bob. I would also speak in favor of scenario C. I think that actually all of the scenarios are good solutions to the challenges we see both today and in the near future. Of those challenges, I think scenario C is anticipates more about what we expect in the future, and also takes into account the likelihood or the certainty that we'll be building other schools and fixing boundaries that are reasonably close to what we can anticipate in the foreseeable future. What I wanted to speak specifically about was that I've heard Don and his staff be very responsive and forthcoming with regard to the transition phase. Transitions are critically important, and you know this much better than I. And I would suggest that we, as we move forward to a decision on the scenario, that we also express support for all of the flexibility that's needed in terms of a reasonable transition, whether that be 1 year or a longer period of time that the staff might subsequently recommend based on our decision this evening. I too, like Paula, have every confidence that not only will we make a good decision, we don't have a bad decision possibility before us, but that it will be implemented with fidelity and sensitivity in a way that takes into account the very real concerns of the families that will be impacted by any decision made by this board. So I argue for, or I advocate for flexibility and sufficient time, and for us to be responsive to the recommendations from staff about what that period of time might be in these transitions.
Okay, thank you. Well said. Other comments?
No, I couldn't agree both with Paula and with Dick that was fantastic. I really believe that offering as much support to the parents going through transitions is imperative that we follow that with fidelity. Thank you for your words as always.
Yeah. Well, and I'll also commend the staff again for the sincere effort to reconcile these multiple variables. The transitions are awkward by their nature, and Don and the staff have pretty much done everything you guys can do to facilitate some of that awkwardness. So if there are no other questions, there is another question.
I'm sorry. Yeah, there is. Scott, on here, and I'll ask you and Don, I guess, combined. You're asking about any actions around open enrollment, grandfathering, anything like that. Is it sufficient for us then to choose the boundary scenario that we support, and then just simply support Dick's suggestion that we're behind you 100% when it comes to doing what you feel is appropriate and what's possible to alleviating that transition? We don't need to specifically vote on any of that, correct?
No, the board policy does outline the grandfather for 4th and 7th graders. So, and in this case, where there's options for open enrollment at all levels, at all grades, I don't know that you need to do a further action in terms of that. And whether transportation provides service back, I don't know if you want to make a recommendation, or that maybe that's just a staff evaluation. Don, I don't know.
I mean, I guess I'm comfortable as long as you all feel like you have the flexibility to do what you need to do, then that's sufficient for me because I trust that you'll
I did
take care
talk
of that.
directly with Scott, but also with Lance Yoxamer, our Director of Transportation, to confirm that we would be providing transportation for the kids next year. So it wasn't something that we are going to think about, talk about, try to figure out. We've had that conversation because we really don't want there to be this significant disruption.
And just with regard to the transition period, do we, if the staff were to make a recommendation based on your implementation, beginning implementation of the boundaries, that we needed, the board policy calls for 1 year, that there might be additional accommodations that would be reasonable in your view, I would hope that that recommendation might come back and we could be responsive at that time.
Absolutely. When we did, I think the last one was the Thunder Valley, and when we did that, we did it for a year and it turned out to be sufficient. We'll do this for a year and then we'll revisit it. If we need to do it another year, then we'll look at that as well, just to see how the numbers flesh out.
Thank you.
All right, so we have a motion, and we have to adopt scenario C in the context of board policies and grandfathering and the accommodations that you guys want to make.
Just clarification, does this also include the change in the high school boundaries?
Yeah, you'd want to include that in, I think, the motion.
So that includes the high school boundary change recommended by staff. Thanks.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, so it's basically the adoption of the C of the first two bullets and then the inclusion of the third bullet with the accommodations that staff sees fit to accommodate the most number of people. So that's the motion. And Barb, if you would please call for the vote.
Mr. Aaron's.
Aye.
Dr. Martyr.
Yes.
Ms. Pierce.
Aye.
Mrs. Fragland.
Yes.
Ms. Seegers.
Aye.
Mrs. Cisco.
Aye.
And Mr. Smith.
Yes. All right. You can.
All right. I just wanted to take 1 second to thank Principal Weinberger and Principal McNeil for being here. You guys were here at the study session and you are here again tonight. It's 9:35. And these are going to be your brand new schools that you'll be leading. So thank you for being here. And we really look forward to the programming and all the wonderful things that are going to happen for kids at those schools. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for being here, and please know that we have every confidence in you guys here. You do a great job. All right, so the motion carries, and that's that. We do have a couple of discussion items. You guys board follow-up. You guys want to, and then we also have board committee assignments. Yeah, why don't we just, I was going to ask if we just do committee assignments. We have kind of discussed some of those. We agreed that Debbie was on more things than we realized at this time. And we can't invite her back to do some of those things. So, Joey, did you keep a list of some of the assignments that we're going to contemplate?
I don't have a list, but I don't think it's super difficult to, no, I think it's pretty easy to go through.
You know, some of the ones that Debbie had listed, I put 3 on my list just to make it simple.
Right.
District parent group representative, the Multicultural Action Committee, and the Boulder County Board of Commission Board Liaison. So those 3 I'm willing to take over, and then I think the other 2.
That's great. I think there was, CASB, which Dick is already on that. And Amory would like to do the Ed Foundation. Other than that, I don't think, I added myself to the rotation for BOCES. Barb, so in the event that Paula and Dick aren't able to attend, then I will.
And there's the Colorado State School Safety Resource Board, but I believe that's an appointed position from the state. And as Debbie moves off, then we're not
I don't think we're obligated, right?
We're not part of that, I don't believe.
Okay. I think that's it, right? Those were all of the updates.
All right, very good.
Just one last thing. You had asked about the students coming from Casby.
Yes, sir.
And Jackie has already scheduled them to be here. I think it's on the 24th.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, sorry, one other thing, the district group representative, are you going to do that? Okay, I did that last year.
Okay,
Last year.
with Debbie?
Yeah, well, she wasn't there, so I subbed for her.
Do you want to be the main person for that and I'll be the alternate, or?
We can talk about it.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
All right, very good. So that then brings us to the end of our agenda. We won't make anybody else sit through the CASB discussion. We'll do that, we'll defer that to another time. So I'll take a motion to adjourn
So moved.
by Emery. There you go, by Karen. And all in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
All right,
Night.
and adjourn. Thank you very much.